All rise. Charlotte County Court's now in session. Honorable Judge Devin George presiding.
Thank you, everybody. You may be seated. Good morning. Can counsel approach? All right, I'm going to address that. All right, ladies and gentlemen of the press as well as spectators, it's been brought to my attention, and I have not personally seen it, so I cannot say anything, but it has been brought to my attention that somebody has been taking photographs with cell phones and posting them or tweeting them on the internet. There is no cell phone usage in the courtroom. Your cell phones are to be turned off. Off means off, not on silent, vibrated, or anything. You are not allowed to take photographs of the proceedings or anything using your cell phone. If you do that, you may in the future be subject to contempt of court. Furthermore, it is my understanding, and I have not seen it, whether it was during proceedings or outside of court, that one of the jurors may have been videotaped and placed on the news. That is in direct violation of the court's order not to videotape the jury. Please do not do so. If any further videotaping or photograph of the jury is located, you will be subject to contempt of court by me. Therefore, you may video this tape during open court while court is in session, while the trial is being conducted. You may not do any videotaping after the court is in recess or during breaks of the court. You are not at any cost to videotape, take photographs, or do anything of this jury while they are on this trial. Any violation of these rules could be subject to contempt of court, sanctions, or otherwise. If any further photographs of the jurors or any photographs that happen by cell phone usage is found on social media, tweeting, blogging, etc., I will ask the cameras and all cell phones to be removed from the court. I'm not going to do that at this time, but as of today, I think that's sufficient warning. I'm going to ask the parties, anybody that you know is a spectator to these proceedings, advise them of the court's order on cell phone usage and photographs during court proceedings. Are there any questions? Okay. And is the state ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, bring up the jury.
Yes, ma'am.
may be seated. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I hope everybody got a good evening of rest. And just a couple questions I'm sure you're anticipating of me. Did anybody do any of their own independent investigation or research in this case? Seeing everybody nodding in the negative. Did anybody contact you or try to speak to you about this case? I'm seeing everybody nodding in the negative. Thank you. I have another issue that I need to address. It's my understanding that there may have been some questions about particular pieces of evidence in the case. I will advise you that during the course of the trial, we will not be taking questions on the evidence presented. I will tell you, however, during your deliberations, you have access to every piece of evidence that is admitted into trial. Everything that can go back in the jury room with you, photographs, some various other things, obviously not the firearms, will go back in the jury room for you to review while you're deliberating. If there's things that can't go back that you would also like to see during your deliberations, you can come into the courtroom and we'll see it, such as if you want to rewatch a video, if you want to observe the firearms, anything like that. During your deliberation is when the court will take questions. What you'll do at that point is write them down. If there are certain questions that we can answer, I will do so in writing or either in open court. And just for your own knowledge, you will have access to every piece of evidence that's presented to you during your deliberations. Go ahead.
The only thing I wanted to say is there was some evidence that was talked about and shown to one of the witnesses that we would have liked to have seen during the proceedings so we could put it all together.
Okay. Understanding, though, how the proceedings go is with the parties, there are some pieces of evidence that for whatever reason aren't published. Again, if it is admitted into evidence, you will have an opportunity to see that. So unfortunately, the purview of the jury is not to tell the parties how to present their case. But again, as I said, if it's admitted into evidence, you will see it. Is the state ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may.
State called Brandon Angelini. You can stand here, please. Face the clerk to be sworn.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you give in this class will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
This way, please.
Just watch your step here.
Good morning, sir. Good morning. Make sure you're speaking in the microphone, please.
Yes, ma'am.
You may inquire.
Good morning. Would you please state your name?
Officer Brandon Angelini,
Where are you employed?
Punta Gorda Police Department.
How long have you been employed there?
About 8 years.
What capacity are you employed there?
Road patrol.
Now, do you have any, I guess when you go through the academy, do you get any kind of firearm training?
We do.
And what is the academy?
What do you mean? Police Academy?
Yes. Sorry. Yes, you're right. There's a different academy, the police academy.
Yeah, what is it?
Yes.
It's to certify us as law enforcement officers.
So every certified law enforcement officer has to go through the academy?
Correct.
And you receive firearm training?
We do.
Can you tell us what kind of firearm training?
I can't recall exactly what we've been through.
Do you have any additional firearm training besides just the police academy?
I do.
What is that?
I am actually a firearms instructor just recently.
And when did you begin to become a firearm instructor?
November of last year.
And have you been certified yet?
I have not done my internship.
So you've completed the actual...
I got the certification.
And who gives you the certification?
The FDLE?
Were you present at the Punta Gorda Police Department on August 9th?
I was.
And did you have an active role in Citizens Academy?
I did.
What was your role?
I was to conduct a static display of my patrol vehicle.
And about how long did that take?
Roughly 5-10 minutes.
And who assigned you your role?
I don't recall. Looking back, though, I did find an itinerary that was emailed to me from Lieutenant Heck.
Okay. And when we previously spoke, you didn't know?
I did not know.
Did you know who was in charge of running the academy?
No, I wasn't aware.
Had you ever previously participated in a Citizens Academy?
This was the first.
Did you even know that PGPD put on Citizens Academies?
No, it was actually kind of new news to me.
Have you ever participated in Citizens Academies outside of PGPD?
I have. Charlotte County Sheriff's Office.
And are you a member of, I guess, are you a SWAT member?
I am a SWAT operator.
What is that?
It's special weapons and tactics, high-risk incidents we get called out.
Okay, and is it just related to the Punta Gorda Police Department?
All of Charlotte County.
So you, from the Punta Gorda Police Department, are a member of the SWAT team?
Correct.
And when did you, how long have you been doing that for?
5 years, over 5 years.
How often do you have to train in order to be a member of the SWAT team? Or how often do you guys get together and do training scenarios?
We train minimum of once a month, and one of those months we have a week-long training.
I'm sorry, what
A
level?
week-long.
And when you train, what kind of firearms do you use?
My agency issued firearms.
What about when you're doing some kind of scenario-based training against, like force on force? Do you use one other?
We use Sims FX marking cartridges and
Okay, and Sims FX, what is FX?
FX is the marking cartridge. It's the soap-filled rounds.
Okay, so when you're doing any kind of one-on-one training, I guess force, kind of force training, you're actually using Sims?
Yes.
When you guys are using Sims, do you wear any kind of protective clothing or gear or anything?
Always.
Why is that?
Because it could be it's a dangerous round if it hits you in a vulnerable area.
Have you ever been hit with a Simunition round that hurt?
They sting.
When you're using Sims, are there any kind of safety checks or procedures in place?
Always.
Describe those to us.
We check every weapon to make sure it is a Sims weapon. They're actually color-coded blue. It depicts them very easily. The rounds are in a container that have a hole, if you will, on the bottom, so we can flip over the container and observe all the bullets, if you will, to be soap-filled rounds and not a real live bullet.
And all of that is done or even though you're just using Simunition?
Correct. At a minimum.
Have you ever been involved in any kind of safety check that involves, I guess, one person checking another person?
Yes, all the time.
Can you explain that?
Yes, we have different. For SWAT, we do, and actually it's falls over into Punta Gorda as well. We have one person. They check each other to make sure that one main person.
I'm sorry.
Okay. The
You ready to go?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry.
to conduct a safety check, everybody lines up in a line. Two people check each other, pretty much designating them as the original safety officers and make sure they're clear of anything, any live rounds, any live weapons, anything like that. And then those become the designated safety officers, and they start on each end of the line, and they kind of start at left side, one guy starts at the right side, and they crisscross, checking everybody's at a minimum of twice.
Okay, so everybody's checked at least twice?
Yes.
By a safety officer?
Yes.
So going back to August 9th, after your part with the static display was done, did you stick around?
I did.
Did you have to stick around?
I did not.
Why did you decide to?
Because I've never seen the scenario before, and I thought it would be a good thing to watch.
Prior to the scenario, did you see leaphole?
I did.
And at any point, did you see anybody checking the firearm he was using?
I never saw a firearm on him at the time.
You never saw a firearm. Did you see a firearm after the events?
During the incident, I saw the firearm.
With this type of scenario where these different weapons were being used, would this be something you would expect to have a safety officer at?
Any training in relation with firearms should have some kind of safety check.
Were you aware of who was designated as a safety officer?
No, I did not.
Do you remember what Lee Cole was wearing that night?
Yes, he was wearing a gray hooded sweatshirt and looked like his work pants.
Any protective gear?
He did. He had a Sims mask on.
Specifically because his Simunition could possibly have been shot at him?
Correct.
What about the female civilian who was participating?
What was she wearing?
I'm sorry, did she wear protective gear?
She did not.
Are you familiar, or going back to August of 2016, did you have access to the Armory?
I did.
And what kind of training firearm did the Armory have back in August?
They have a silver revolver and blue Sims guns.
And what was your knowledge of what that silver revolver was capable of shooting?
At the time, I didn't know it was an operable weapon at all.
You thought it was inoperable?
Correct.
Would the chain of command have known that it was inoperable?
Yes, if indeed it was.
Had you ever seen Lee Cole with a silver revolver prior to August 9th?
I have.
And where was that?
The sheriff's office shooting range, gun range.
And why were you there?
I was there for a Citizens Police Academy for SWAT.
One moment, Your Honor. No further questions.
Cross-examination?
Good morning.
So let me just follow up with the last question the state asked me. The silver revolver that you saw Lee Cole with, was that similar like the silver revolver you saw on August 9th?
Correct.
And the event that he was at using that was an event that was governed by the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office?
Correct.
And at that event, had, to your knowledge, was there a training session with K-9 before that event began?
There was.
Okay, so your knowledge of the event you went to is that Lee Cole was training with the sheriff's officers on K-9 use with that gun, is that correct?
Correct.
And then after that event, they had scheduled a public community demonstration or presentation for the public to come to, correct?
Yes.
Now, in that event also, did you see the crowd of the public that was there to watch the demonstration?
Yes.
Okay. And the crowd that was there to watch the demonstration, if somebody had a weapon that had a live round in it, was the crowd within a distance of where the demonstration was, that somebody could have been shot from watching that demonstration if somebody had live rounds?
Yes.
In that demonstration, did you observe Lee Cole firing off that gun and firing off what appeared to be blanks?
I did.
And you see him fire it multiple times?
I did.
Were you around at all prior to that for any type of discussion about the gun or the ammunition or any type of test fire?
I was not.
So now, by the way, was Chief Lewis at that event?
He was not.
Were the command staff of the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office, as far as the training officers over the K-9 and over everybody at that event?
I couldn't tell you. I don't know who their training officers are.
Were there other Charlotte County Sheriff's officers there basically running that event?
Yes.
And on the night of August 9th, you did your patrol static display, correct?
Correct.
And basically you walked around the car and answered questions about the car, that type of thing?
Yes.
Turned on the lights and the siren type of thing?
Yes.
And at the same time you were doing that, did you see Chief Lewis basically with the crowd giving briefings or taking them through these statics?
No, I don't recall seeing Chief Lewis until the scenario.
Okay, all right. So wherever you were doing your static, were the groups coming through at different times?
Yes.
Kind of milling about?
I think there was a couple stations there, so they were kind of just cycling through the couple of stations.
And so when you saw the whole group together, then is when you remember seeing Chief Lewis, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, you recall seeing Captain Woodard come down from the squadron with the blue Sims gun in his hand, correct?
Yes.
And you also saw present at this event Lieutenant Salzman, is that right?
Yes.
Captain Woodard,
Yes.
Officer Chodakowski,
Correct.
Officer Jimenez,
Yes.
Officer Cole,
Yes.
Officer Kennedy.
Yes.
After the static display, Captain Woodard took 2 role players from the crowd and went to a different place than everybody else, correct?
Correct.
And basically, you then saw Captain Woodard walk back from the training room with the female that was going to do the first scenario.
Yes.
Ms. Nolan, correct?
Yes, Ms. Knowlton.
While that's happening, Chief Lewis is not going in with Captain Woodard to do anything with the participants, correct? He's still with the crowd?
Yes, I did not see him near the door with them.
Okay. And as you advised the state earlier on this, you were instructed to be there, at least contacted to be there by Lieutenant Heck, correct?
Correct.
Now, when you participated in this other event where you saw Lee Cole shooting the blanks, at that time when you were watching that, did you believe that to be the silver gun that the Punta Gorda Police Department had, or did you know if that was the gun that the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office had given?
I was not aware where the gun came from.
Okay. So it's just the same gun both times, you didn't know where it came from?
Correct.
Whether the gun that the Punta Gorda Police Department kept was inoperable or not, you were not aware of, correct?
Correct.
You had an assumption about it, but you didn't know.
Right.
Have you ever trained on a wad cutter?
I have not.
Did you know what a wad cutter was before any of this?
No.
Is it something in your training with FDLE that there's something you've brought up comparing wad cutters to blanks?
No, the curriculum for FDLE actually speaks of utilizing, permitting the use of blanks in role play scenarios to kind of give the participants that realistic feel.
Okay.
And that was the most I knew about the blanks. I've never used them personally.
In your training, well, let's go back then. The state asked you about the training before. FDLE is the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, correct?
Correct.
And the Florida Department of Law Enforcement comes up with a curriculum to train all of the officers that operate within the state, correct?
Correct.
And you then are trained, and all officers are trained through the FDLE curriculum, right?
Yes.
And the FDLE curriculum then addresses blanks as far as training you about what they're about, as far as what you just said.
Correct.
All right. And what the FDLE curriculum trained you in your experience is that blanks were permitted for role-playing needs, correct?
Correct.
Now, part of that, I take it, is you're also trained on whether you're using blanks or any other type of weapon. There's training about safety in using those things, correct?
Always.
All right. And one of the things that you're trained from the beginning of the police academy and from the beginning of FDLE's curriculum is to not point a weapon at anybody unless you're intending to try and shoot them, correct?
Correct.
All right. And same thing with the use of blanks. If they're used in role play, they're supposed to be used in a safe manner. That's the training, right?
Yes.
And that's across the board for every officer, right?
Yes.
You're also trained that you're supposed to treat every weapon as if it's loaded, correct?
Correct.
So even if you clear a weapon and you give it to 5 other officers that are firearm instructors and they all clear it, the rule still is do not point it and treat it if it's loaded, right?
Correct.
Now, would you agree with me that the importance of any type of demonstration or event or training, the things we talked about before as far as safety, involves not who is listed as the safety person, but the fact that safety checks are done?
Yes.
Okay. And that night, were you aware of what role or what Captain Woodard was doing as far as, let's say, the Simunitions gun?
I did not know.
Okay. And that night, were you aware of what contact Captain Woodard had with Lee Cole?
No.
There are often, there are in your agency lieutenants that are, I guess, are in charge of the training division?
Yes.
And tell the jury what that is. The training, what the training officers do.
The supervisor, the
Right.
lieutenant is in charge of pretty much implementing the training We do have other officers that create lesson plans, but the training is put on or by that supervisor.
And the lieutenants in charge of training, that is a job that is delegated to them, obviously, within the authority. Like the chief will say, your job is to do this, correct?
Correct.
And in this case, who was the active training lieutenant at the time of this event? I mean, as far as on August 9th.
Lieutenant Salzman,
Okay. And who held that position? How long have you been with the Punta Police Department?
almost 8 years,
Okay. And who held that position before Lieutenant Salzman?
was Captain Woodard.
So you had both the people that had served as the training officers there for this event that night? Right?
Yes.
Okay. And have you served in different roles within the agency?
Mainly road patrol.
Okay. Have you had to do things where you had to investigate, or you had to do a traffic ticket, things like that?
Yes, normal.
Would you agree with me that whether they put you in a role of, let's say, doing traffic enforcement or doing burglary investigations, your experience on those things doesn't end when you leave that particular job, correct?
Correct.
All right. So, did you have it, like, for example, when Captain Woodard was there, if you saw Captain Woodard bringing the Simunition gun out, which you said you saw,
I did.
right? You're aware that he has done that role as the training officer in the past?
Correct.
No expectation you're thinking that he doesn't know how to do a role that he did for 5 years?
Right.
That doesn't cause you an alarm to go, what is Captain Woodard doing instead of Lieutenant Salzman?
Right.
When you talked about the training that goes on with the sims and the lineup and the going down the line and those things there, those are done in the issues of training officers on force, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Do those sometimes involve officers that have not gone through that training before?
Yes.
Okay, so the training there is to give the officers some type of knowledge so they walk out of there trained on how to use force, correct?
Yes.
Lee Cole, that night, that was there serving the role as the bad guy, okay, is already a trained law enforcement officer, correct?
Correct.
He's already trained how to use blanks, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that's what the canine especially uses, correct?
Yes.
All right. And would you agree with me that training of officers and all of that scenario is different than a community demonstration?
Yes.
Okay. Would you agree with me that in a community demonstration, anytime you're dealing with the public, every officer that's there for a public demonstration is a safety officer?
Yes.
Nobody gets to take the luxury of saying, well, I'm not the designated safety officer, so I'm not going to check on anything or alert anything if I see something wrong. Everybody's held responsible to do that, right?
Everybody.
Okay. When we're talking about an issue, let's just say doing a safety check on a gun, let's talk practically what we're talking about. To do a safety check on a gun, who has the initial responsibility to make sure the gun is properly loaded and is a safe functioning gun? Who has that initial responsibility?
As a live firearm?
Any firearm?
If it's my firearm, I do.
Okay. And again, that's trained to all officers. You are ultimately the person responsible for this, correct?
Yes.
Okay. There, you can't say, well, nobody checked me, so I didn't really understand what was going on with my own gun. Nobody can do that, right?
Right.
Not supposed to. All right. And when you're doing training also, is there a part of training where you actually go through, before you do the simunition things, where you're checking the boxes that the bullets come in?
Yes.
Okay. And so what does the box that the bullet come in, what kind of stuff would that tell you? Why are you looking at the box?
Make sure it's a Sims round and not a live round.
Okay, because the box that the simunitions come in will tell you, simunition round, it can write out what it's for, it tells you what the warnings are, and it gives you something to put in your mind to explain what these bullets are, right?
Yes.
Would you agree with me that any officer that is using ammunition that they have never used before or seen before has a duty to read the box to understand what they're getting?
Yes.
Okay. Would you agree with me that it would be considered something not expected, certainly not likely, that a person would receive a box of ammunition that they've never used and just not look at it?
No, it needs to be looked at.
Can you redirect?
Yes. Officer Angelini, how is it today that you have such specific knowledge about the FDLE curriculum regarding blanks, when 3 weeks ago in your deposition you had no idea?
After we spoke about it, I researched it.
Okay, did you also speak with Mr. Romine?
No,
You've never spoke with him?
never.
Okay, why did you decide to research it?
Because I was coming on the stand to testify.
Okay. And what kind of role play exercises was the FDLE curriculum talking about?
It just says per agency. It's discretionary shooting, discretionary role playing per the agency.
Okay, so in a shoot, don't shoot scenario, you think that this applies?
Any type of training.
And I think you said if no safety officer, or I guess no safety officer is necessary as long as there are safety checks, right?
Every officer is a safety officer.
Okay, but you said something, or I actually believe defense counsel asked you, do you really need a safety officer as long as you just have safety checks, and you agreed with him?
I'm sorry, maybe I misunderstood. Every officer is a safety officer.
Okay,
So there's always an officer that's,
okay, so everybody is responsible, right?
everybody is.
Okay, well, what if nobody does the checking?
Somebody should do the check-in. I don't understand.
If everybody's responsible and assumes that somebody else checked, then doesn't the theory of everybody's a safety officer and no designation is needed kind of go to waste?
Yes, in a sense.
And you spoke about, you've previously seen Officer Woodard, or I'm sorry, Captain Woodard, check sim weapons in the past?
I've seen him check the weapons.
The defense attorney asked you about Captain Woodard in previous experiences. You've seen him do checks on simunition weapons.
I think he asked if that's part of his role.
Is it part of his role?
If he's involved in training, yes, that's just part of his role.
Okay, have you ever seen him do this?
No,
Okay, so you're just assuming this is something he does?
correct. That is something he does.
No further questions.
Brief.
And just to clarify, I never talked to you, interviewed you before this, correct?
Correct.
In the deposition that the state refers to, what case was that a deposition on?
That was on the Lee Cole case.
And was I present for that?
You were not.
Did I ask you questions at that?
You did not.
You were questioned by Lee Cole's attorney, correct?
Correct.
And FDLE that interviewed you that night, you were interviewed by an FDLE agent, correct?
Correct.
You gave your statement to the FDLE agent that night, correct?
Correct.
You may step down, sir.
Thank you.
State, call your next witness.
Justin DeVault.
Sir, if you can stand here, face the court to be sworn.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony given in this class will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I did.
This way, please. Just watch your step on this. Thank you.
Make sure you speak into the microphone, please. You may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Can you tell the jury your name, please?
Justin DeVault,
Can you spell your last name for us, please?
it's spelled D-A-V-O-U-L-T.
And do you work, sir?
I do.
Where do you work?
Currently employed with the City of Punta Gorda Police Department.
What is your position with PGPD?
I am a corporal detective in our criminal investigations section.
Is that referred to as CIS commonly?
Yes. Years.
Do you have any law enforcement experience before you started with PGPD?
No.
I direct your attention to August 9th of last year. What time did you come into work that day?
Shortly before 8 o'clock a.m.
And were you assigned a role for the Chamber Police Night with the Chamber of Commerce group that night?
I was.
What role were you assigned to?
To head up the tour for the CIS division.
Some of the groups that would come through and come through criminal investigations, right?
That's correct. They would do a Q&A with us.
What time did your shift start that day for work?
8 a.m.
And do you remember what time you finished working that day? I'm sorry, let me ask you a better question. I apologize. What time did your scheduled shift end that day?
4 p.m.
And were you there at the police department when the chamber group got there around 5:30 p.m.?
I was.
Where were you when it started, when the event started?
I was in our training room during the introduction.
And that's the little classroom type of room?
Correct.
Who was there in the training room when the event started?
Police personnel and then citizens that were attending.
Do you remember which police personnel were there?
I believe Lieutenant Heck, Captain Woodard, Captain Cischini, myself, and Chief Lewis,
You think Katie,
among a few others that I don't recall.
were those ranking officers, or were those, I guess, not the chain of command officers, do you recall?
Some were road patrol officers and some were ranking. Others were assigned to different tours of the event.
Some of the displays outside of the building?
Correct, the static display and things of that nature.
And your testimony is that you think Katie Heck was there that night?
I believe she was.
Okay. How positive are you about that?
I can't say I'm 100% sure.
Was Corporal Becky Grimm there?
I don't recall.
What about Gloria Sapana?
Yes, she was there.
What did Tom Lewis do with the group in that training room?
He conducted the introduction to everybody, welcoming them to the police department.
And I think you said when the tours started, you were in the criminal investigations section doing like a Q&A type section.
That's correct. Prior to the completion of the introduction, I had departed to go to the CIS office in preparation for the first tour to come through.
And how many tour groups came through?
It was either 3 or 4.
Do you remember approximately how many people were in each group?
7 to 10.
At some point in the evening, were you with Captain Woodard in the Armory?
I was.
And what is the Armory?
Armory is where we keep all of the reserve weapons and ammunition.
All the guns and the ammo are kept there?
Correct.
Is that a secure room?
It is.
Do you know how many people have access to that room?
I don't know the exact number, no.
Is it designed just so, I guess, a select few?
That's correct. That's correct.
You know if Captain Woodard had access to that armory back then?
I'm not 100% sure if he had access or not at that time.
You were in the armory with Captain Woodard that night?
Just into the threshold of the doorway, yes.
Why were you in the armory with him?
Captain Woodard had, as I left the training room from the introduction, I had walked back to CIS, as I stated, and on my way back, Captain Woodard had stopped me and asked me to check a weapon.
And did you do that?
I did.
Can you tell us how you checked the weapon?
The weapon was the Simunitions round. It's blue and black, Glock style, semi-automatic pistol, similar to the weapon that we carry on duty. The box of ammunition was on the table, and Captain Woodard had the pistol and the magazine. He'd asked me to check it to make sure that they were the Simunitions rounds, so I'd picked the box up and looked underneath the crate that they're carried in, and to confirm that they were all blue-tipped Simunitions rounds.
Are they individually slotted?
They are in the crate that they're housed. After I checked that, they were all blue-tipped rounds. I had taken one out at a time and handed him one at a time, and he had loaded it into the magazine.
Do you know how many Simunitions round that Glock training weapon can hold in the magazine?
I'm not 100% sure. I would say anywhere from 10 to 13 rounds. And to my knowledge, it was not loaded to full capacity.
Do you know how many Captain Woodard loaded into that magazine?
I would be speculating. I don't know the exact number that I handed him.
You don't think it was loaded to full capacity?
I don't believe it was.
So you're basically a double check for Captain Woodard, is that fair to say?
Yes.
Did you give Captain Woodard a holster for that weapon to leave the armory with?
I did.
Can you tell us what that holster is designed for?
The holster that I had provided him was designed for a Glock weapon. It's actually it was at the time my duty holster. There was not a holster for that weapon, so he had asked me if we had another one. So I had gone back to my office. I had unloaded my weapon, put it into a secondary holster that I had in my office, and took my primary holster off and provided it to Captain Woodard.
So obviously your holster for your department-issued Glock works the same for a Simunition's Glock, right?
That's correct. The frame is the same.
Why was a holster necessary for that Simunition's weapon?
I would be speculating, but typically during the scenario,
Sustained.
Why did you give him a holster for that Simunition's weapon?
he asked for one.
Was it done for safety purposes?
I would.
Sustained.
Why are the Simunition's weapons and Simunition's ammo kept in the armory?
I'm not for sure. I mean, that's where all of the weapons and ammo are stored, and it's a secured room.
The Simunition's weapon that you helped Captain Woodard load the magazine,
Yes.
is it capable of accepting a live round?
To my knowledge, no.
So I know you double-checked for those blue tips on the Simunition's rounds, but had they, at least in theory, been a real round, would it have been able to go into that magazine and into the firearm?
Into the magazine, possibly, but I don't think through the weapon.
When Captain Woodard left the armory, was he holding the gun with the magazine in it?
I had left prior to him. Once it was checked, I handed him the individual rounds, and I departed the room to go back to CIS for the first tour.
When you finished I think you said 3 tour groups in CIS, what did you do after that?
I locked our office, turned the lights off, and departed.
Did you go outside of the building?
I did.
Did you go out to the parking lot area?
I did.
Did you see Officer Cole outside in the parking lot?
I did.
Where did you see him?
He was by his patrol SUV, by the squad room door, which is on the south side of the building.
And do you remember where he was in relation to his car?
I want to say he was on the passenger side of the vehicle. The vehicle was backed into either the first or second parking spot.
Do you recall whether he was toward the front side door or the back seat door?
The front side.
And do you remember if the door was open or closed?
It was open.
Do you remember if the car was on or off?
That I don't recall.
Did you see Officer Cole with a gun at that time?
I saw him with a gun, yes.
Where did he have that gun?
He had it in his hand, to my recollection, and then he was attempting to place it in his waistband.
Did you talk to him at all?
I did.
What did you talk to him about?
We had a operation that we conducted the weekend prior, and he was stuck conducting additional paperwork. We had made multiple late arrests, and he had arrested the subjects, and he was there additional hours more than everybody else, completing his paperwork. So I had that was the first time I had saw him or spoken to him after that operation. So I was just advising him, good job the other night. Sorry you had to stay. He stated that he was okay. He just got a little tired. And again, I said, good job. Have a good night.
Kind of catching up since the last time you saw him.
Yes.
Did you check him for his weapon at that time?
I did not.
Did you ever do that?
I did not.
Were you assigned to do that?
I was not.
Did you see anyone else at any point in the night check Officer Cole's weapon, his ammunition, pat him down, anything like that?
No, I did not.
After you talked with Officer Cole for a little bit at his car, what did you do next?
I got into my unmarked patrol vehicle and left.
You weren't there when the shooting took place.
I was not.
You come back to the Punta Gorda Police Department that night?
I did.
How did that happen?
I actually went to my children's open house for school, and shortly after I arrived there, I got a phone call from Captain Woodard advising to contact the detectives and have everybody respond in.
I want to talk to you for a moment about in-service training between officers. Are there safety checks when you do training with the Punta Gorda Police Department?
Yes, there are.
Are there safety officers designated during that?
Typically, the one holding the training is the officer that does the search.
A firearms instructor?
The one that yes,
Person leading the training?
yes,
Lieutenant David Lipker leads trainings for the Punta Gorda Police Department, for example.
he has,
And that person would do a search, you said?
yes.
What kind of search?
They would search us for weapons.
Is that before you come into the area of the training?
Yes.
What do they do to search you?
They physically do a pat-down search of your person.
Check your pockets and any bags you have, things like that?
Yes.
When you arrive, let's say it's at the range for a training, I think your agency goes to the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office range, is that correct?
We have.
When you go to the training, do you sign any sort of safety guidelines or directives?
Yes, there's a couple boxes to initial, and then sign the bottom of a form, just safety protocol.
Is it fair to say that you're friends with Tom Lewis?
Yes.
How long have you known him?
Just during my employment with the Punta Gorda Police Department, so approximately 8 years.
Since this took place on August 9th of last year, have you talked with Tom Lewis about what happened that night?
Specifically, no.
How many times have you talked to him since August 9th of last year?
Quite a bit. Mostly about work, though.
Other than work, what have you talked to him about?
I've seen him out in public, after hours. Just, hello, how you doing?
When was the most recent time you talked to Tom Lewis?
Probably 3 weeks ago. I saw him passing through at the station, and I said hello.
Have you talked to him at all about the evidence in this case?
No, not specifically to him, no. I mean, obviously there's a lot of buzz around the station of what's going to transpire throughout the coming months, but not specifically about evidence.
Fair to say everybody at PGPD has been talking about this case?
Sure.
After the charges were filed in this case and before today, did you attend a fundraising event for Chief Lewis?
I did.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions for the witness at this time.
Cross-examination?
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Okay, so let me follow up with some things the state just asked you there. When you are doing these in-service trainings that you talked about, okay, and then you talked about the person, there's a person there, basically is the lead person. In the Punta Gorda Police Department, who is the in-service trainer?
We've had multiple, but our trainings typically go through Lieutenant Salzman.
Okay. Lieutenant Salzman is one of the same people that trained you in service that would have been at this event that night, correct?
Correct.
And prior to that, who was the training person for in-service training that would do checks, et cetera?
Lieutenant Mohawk.
Okay. What about Captain Woodard?
I apologize, yes, Captain Woodard was previously the training lieutenant.
He was a training lieutenant for, like, I believe, 5 years, correct?
Yes, yes,
And he was the training lieutenant right before Lieutenant Salzman, correct?
that's correct.
Okay. So the person that you described for the state that would do the checks and was capable of doing those at in-service training for 5 years was Captain Woodard, and then after that was Lieutenant Salzman, correct?
That's correct.
And both of them were present at that event that night, correct?
Yes.
Now, let me ask you this. When you're doing in-service training and you're talking about protective gear on a training issue between officers with simunition guns, that's because the officers are going to be shooting the pellets at each other, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
One person in that group, though, is not wearing any type of protective gear, right? Meaning the person leading the training, correct?
Yes, that's correct. They typically wear eye just for protective, but nothing else.
Right. And the reason the training person who's there in the presence of all these people shooting at each other is not wearing the rest of the training, the rest of the protective gear, is no one's intended to shoot at him, correct?
That's correct. They're typically not in play.
Okay. Even though they're in the area of where this is to conduct the training, right?
That's right.
And if somebody wanted to turn and put that sim gun on them, they could shoot them and hit them, correct?
Yes.
Now, when the state asked you if you talked to Tom Lewis, to be clear about this incident happened August 9th of 2016, correct?
Yes.
And Tom Lewis worked with you as the chief the rest of August, correct?
Yes.
The rest of September,
Yes.
October of 16,
Yes.
November of 16,
Yes.
December of 16,
Yes.
January of 17,
Yes.
and February of 17 until a charge was placed against him, correct?
Yes, I'm not 100% accurate when that charge was filed, but yes, up to that point.
So the fact that you had communication with the chief of your agency that you're working cases with and doing, is that because that went on for 7 months before there was any charge placed against him, right?
That's correct.
The fact that anybody else has talked to him in any capacity about this is because he was the chief there for 7 months before a charge was placed against him, correct?
Yes.
Now, you gave let me ask you timing-wise. FDLE came out that night. Chief Lewis asked for FDLE to come out and handle the investigation, correct?
Yes.
Your agency didn't say, well, we're going to investigate ourselves and we'll tell you what happened. You brought in an outside agency to say, tell us what happened here, correct?
That's correct.
And when FDLE came that night, agents showed up that night, right?
Yes.
And they brought a team of people there to do interviews, multiple people, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. My question is this. Did you stay from August 9th at 7 o'clock all the way till 10:40 in the morning before you were interviewed, or was there a break for you?
I was interviewed that night, but it was not 10:40 the next day.
Okay. So how many times were you interviewed?
I believe once.
Okay. Well, let me ask you, were you interviewed at, do you remember being interviewed on August 10th, 2016 at 10:40 a.m.?
Yes, that must have been the first time I was interviewed.
Okay. So was that, and that's back to my regular question, was that something where you were like working an overnight and just stayed till they got it, or they just set yours up for the next morning?
No, I had left the station that night and then came back the following morning.
Okay. All right. And I understand your interview back then was August of 2016. You testified to some testimony here, and I have a specific question that I want to ask you. But would it help to, when you testified that you believed that you were in the hallway when Captain Woodard contacted you. Was that in reference to doing the armory, doing the gun check?
Yes, I was walking down the hallway when he'd stopped me.
Isn't it true that he actually, when you were in class, is the first time he approached you because he sought the holster?
He spoke to me about the holster first, yes.
And were you in the classroom at the time when Chief Lewis was giving the presentation?
Yes.
Do you remember that?
I was in there for the majority of it, but I left prior to the completion.
Right. Do you remember, though, my specific question is, do you remember Captain Woodard coming up to you during Chief Lewis's presentation and saying, hey, I need to try and get you to get a holster, and you leaving with him? Do you remember that or not?
I recall that vaguely, yes.
Would it help to refresh your recollection?
Yes.
To review something there?
Well, my only question is the exact timing of when that conversation took place, but yes, that conversation took place.
Would it help to refresh your recollection to review what you discussed with them?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, first witness?
You may.
And if you can just read to yourself from here. So about here. And when you're done, just tell me if that refreshes your recollection.
Yes.
So, having reviewed that, does that refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Okay, so when did Captain Woodard first engaged you during the introduction with the chief, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and so he did that in a room in which the chief was present, right?
Yes,
Okay, the chief was like at the front of the room with like the PowerPoint or something?
that's correct.
And about how far were you distance-wise when Captain Woodard comes to you and you get up and leave with him?
I was towards the back of the room.
Right?
The class was kind of sitting in the middle of the room, and I was probably halfway between the door and the rear of the room.
Okay. Was there anything obstructing as far as any line of sight that you had on the chief while he was giving a presentation?
No,
Anything obstructing his line of sight towards you?
no.
Okay. So when Captain Woodard is in the room and asks you to step out, you then get up and the two of you leave together, correct?
Yes, I was standing in the back of the room, but yes, I walked out.
Okay, so you left with him. Now, your role that night was assigned to you by Katie Heck, correct?
That's correct. I got an email from her, along with others, indicating I was responsible for CIS.
Okay, so she assigned that to you, and you knew what that meant as far as assigned to the CIS tour. You knew what to do with that.
Yes.
Nobody had to spell that out for you, what your duties were to do that?
No, my lieutenant was on vacation at the time, so I was covering for him.
Okay, and when you're doing a tour in CIS, if there's something in there that is, let me ask you, does CIS have things in there that you don't want civilians touching?
Yes.
Okay, so your job, you knew included also that when you're giving this tour, if something happens with a civilian and they're getting involved in something, touching something, or at risk of something, it's your duty to keep them safe or keep their hands on things, correct?
Yes.
Did anybody have to send you an email to tell you that?
No.
Did anybody have to tell you, you're the CIS person, and for that event, you are the designated safety officer during the time they're in that agency?
No.
The act of Captain Woodard asking you for a holster was for the shoot, don't shoot incident, correct?
Yes.
It is part of the preparation for that incident that he was undertaking, correct?
Yes.
Chief Lewis didn't come down to you in the middle of this and say, hey, we need to go get holsters or anything like that, correct?
No.
In fact, he's in the middle of a presentation to people, right?
That's correct.
After you go ahead and get the holster, that there's a realization that the one you gave him may not exactly fit the Sims gun if it's used, so you go ahead and give your personal one, which you know will fit, correct?
Yes.
So at the Armory then, Captain Woodard's in command level staff, correct?
Yes.
And Captain Woodard was in before as far as the training officer in charge of the Armory, correct?
Yes.
And so when Captain Woodard, that didn't alarm you that he was going to the Armory to prepare a weapon, did it?
Not at all.
And so when he asked you to come in there, he was asking you to come and perform as basically what they call the secondary, right?
Yes.
And tell the jury what the secondary is.
It's basically, having more than one set of eyes on a weapon to confirm that that the correct type of ammo is being loaded into it.
And you agreed to do that, correct?
Yes, I did.
And you're completely capable of doing that, right?
Yes.
You know what a bullet looks like, correct?
Yes, I do.
You know a bullet has like a dome or a projectile head on it, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So now when you're in there, you're not necessarily, well, if you saw bullets, you would have said, hey, those are bullets, not Sims rounds, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. And if you saw him loading in bullets to the magazine, even if they fit, and you put them in the Sims round and fired them and they didn't quite make it out of the barrel, that'd be very dangerous, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, because it would explode the thing, right?
Sure.
Okay. So you're going through that with him, and tell the jury, let me speed it up. The process is, would you agree, he takes a bullet and looks at it, or a Sim round with the blue thing on it. He looks at it and he hands it to you, right?
Well, it was reversed in this particular situation.
Okay. So you would look at it and then hand it to him,
Yes, that's correct. I actually checked first at the bottom
right?
and then took out one at a time, handed it to him. He checked it again and then placed it into the magazine.
Okay. And so would you consider that to be a safety check?
Yes.
Would you consider it to be a safety check being conducted for the purpose of the Simunition demonstration?
Yes.
And that was something that was initiated with your involvement by Captain Woodard, correct?
That's correct.
All right. So you go through all of those things, and then you checked whatever how many it was. You don't remember a specific number, correct?
That's correct.
It was more than 5.
I would say yes.
Okay. When you're done with that, and you've seen that, and you guys have done that together, you then return to the presentation that Chief Lewis is giving, correct?
No, I think I'm headed to my office at that time, if I recall correctly.
May I approach the witness again? Refresh your recollection to look at your statement from August of 2015.
Absolutely.
May I approach?
You may.
Take a look at me back right there, and if that refreshes your recollection.
Yes.
Okay, so, is your recollection refreshed now?
Yes,
Okay, did you go back to the presentation that Chief was giving?
I did.
So the Chief is still in there with the crowd?
Yes.
And so this safety check on the Simunition gun has been completed while he's still in the presence of the crowd giving the instruction, right?
Yes.
And you would have returned into the room, which is going to basically the same place you were before?
Yes, same door, yes.
And so nothing obstructing his view of you or your view of him?
No.
Did you see Captain Woodard at all involved in any way whatsoever in giving the presentation to the crowd that was there? As far as what the chief's doing? Did he have a role in it, Captain Woodard? Did he give a presentation, or was this just strictly the chief?
Yeah, I only recall seeing the chief doing the introduction.
Okay. Now, Captain Woodard, once he had the gun ready, holstered the Simunition Glock and he put it in your holster, is that correct?
That's correct.
And when you left him, he had everything involved with that gun. He didn't ask you to take anything with you, correct?
No.
And he maintained control over that weapon, correct?
Yes.
So now you're at the point where you're doing the tours. Now there's 3 separate tours, right? Or 3 separate groups.
That's correct.
Okay, so you meet one group, you do your CSI presentation, they move on, next group comes in, right?
Yes.
And while that's going on, one of those groups is being led by Chief Lewis, correct?
Yes, I believe so, yes.
And at the end of the last group, the 3rd group, that last group, they went back to the training room to get together before anybody went outside, correct?
I don't have knowledge of that. I don't recall.
You recall? All right. Again, would it refresh your recollection?
Absolutely. Yes.
Does that refresh your recollection?
Yes, it does.
Okay, the third group then headed back into the training room, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And when that happened, that is when, well, you don't go with them to the training room, right?
No.
All right. You then go outside where the shoot, don't shoot is going to be done, correct?
Outside the back door, not to that specific area, but yes, out in that direction.
And when you walk out, you see Lee Cole by his patrol SUV, correct?
Yes.
And you and Lee Cole meet up and you have the discussion about the operation that you testified to earlier, correct?
Correct.
And you see the silver revolver in his hand, correct?
Yes.
Now, you knew from your experience there the agency had a snub-nose revolver that was used in training, correct?
Yes.
And it was silver, just like the color of what he had in his hand.
That's accurate.
And that gun that you were familiar with was typically kept in the armory, correct?
Yes.
And it would have been under the control of the training lieutenant, correct?
Yes.
And the training lieutenant at that time was Lieutenant Sullivan, right?
Correct.
So, while you were out there with Lee Cole, it's safe to say there's other people milling around, correct?
Yes.
Because they're getting ready to go do static displays, right?
Yes.
So other officers are out there, correct?
Correct.
And you and Lee Cole aren't in some hidden alcove together or some secreted area where just the two of you. You're out in public where everybody else is moving around as well, right?
That's correct.
So if anybody believed they saw you with Lee Cole with his gun out, that would be a truthful statement. You were with him when he had his gun out, correct?
Yes.
And that would have been prior to the shoot-don't-shoot event, correct?
That's correct.
While you were there, did Lee Cole ever say to you that he needed any other?
Sustained.
Did you do any type of safety checks on his gun?
No.
Did he show you any type of ammunition?
No.
Did he show you any type of box with ammunition?
No.
Did he ask you any questions about ammunition?
No.
You had been a law enforcement officer how long at that point?
Almost 7 years.
Were you in a, as far as rank roll, a higher rank than him who was under you?
Yes, I was a corporal at that time.
And you mentioned that you saw Lee Cole trying to tuck the silver revolver in his waistband. Describe what you saw.
He was standing by his passenger side front door, and I recall him having the weapon initially maybe in the car, and then he reached in to get it off the passenger seat, and he had pulled his waistband out a little bit to try to position the pistol in his waistband.
Was the barrel of that gun, I guess, face down in his pants?
Yes, it would be face down, handle facing up.
Is that a manner in which you'd ever carry a Glock that's carrying live ammunition to put it face down in your waistband in your pants?
Yes, that would never recommended.
What about for a revolver that you believe had live rounds in it to put it down that way in your pants?
I would never suggest that.
You then at that point, when you're done, how long do you think your interaction was legal, estimate?
3 to 5 minutes.
Okay. And in that time, again, in those 3 to 5 minutes, the static displays are being set up and people are milling about in the same general area?
Yes, on the east and north side of the building, yes.
Okay. So then you go to get your car and leave, correct?
That's correct.
But as you're leaving, you make some observations as far as when you're leaving as to what you see, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And what you observed was now you saw Lee Cole now under the wash bay where the scenario was near where the scenario was going to be. correct?
That's correct.
And when you saw him, at this point, he had the gray hood up, right?
Yes.
And you actually saw another officer there with him at that time, correct?
Yes.
Did you know who that other officer was?
Captain Woodard.
Okay, so you're observing as you're leaving before it begins that now Captain Woodard is having contact with him when he's now in the gray hood, right where the scenario is, correct?
Yes.
And of course, you're driving out, right?
Yes.
So you didn't stop and see how long they were dealing with each other.
No.
Okay. And the other thing you noticed as you were leaving is that as he's there, Captain Woodard with Lee Cole, that the crowd is now coming out as well, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And they're beginning to, basically, the crowd's now going to go to the statics.
Correct.
You would agree with me that in the 8 years that you've been with the Punta Police Department, that every year that every officer has to qualify for a firearm, correct?
That's correct.
And that not only is the qualification of the firearm, go over again firearm safety with you at those times, but the Punta Police Department itself puts out a document that it makes officers sign called the Cardinal Rules of Firearm Safety or something like that, right?
That sounds accurate.
And there's a lot of rules to firearm safety, obviously, right? There's a lot of
Absolutely.
intricacies. But on this one, there's like 4 real basic ones up front, that there's a box that you have to actually put your initials next to, correct?
That's correct.
One of them is do not point a gun at anybody, right?
Yes.
And one of them is treat every gun as loaded, correct?
That's correct.
And every officer has to do that at some point during the agency periodically, correct?
Yes.
Now, when the state asked you if you talked to Tom Lewis, we went over the time frame there. Did you, in this case at all, were you ever in any type of meeting with the state attorney's office at all about this case?
I did.
Okay, and when was that? Approximately?
Approximately 2 weeks ago.
Okay. And so, was that for the purposes of discussing your testimony in this case?
Yes.
Okay. And normal thing that lawyers do is talk to witnesses before about testimony. You agree with me on that?
Sure.
Okay. And in those times when we talk with people about testimony, you know, regardless of who's talking to you, you can answer questions about what you saw that night, what you heard, clarify things, correct?
Yes.
That's a normal part of the process before trials, correct?
Yes.
And did you come to that meeting with them voluntarily?
I did.
May I have a moment?
You may. Any redirect?
Detective DeVault, when you came and met with Mrs. Russell, that was here in the courthouse, right?
It was.
It was about 2 weeks ago or so?
Yes.
Was it at that time, that the last time you had spoken to Tom Lewis was about a week before that meeting with us?
Yes.
When you talked with Tom Lewis about a week before that pretrial meeting where we were preparing for this trial, you weren't talking to Tom Lewis about work-related things, were you?
No.
When you came and met with Mrs. Russell and I understand you came there, you weren't happy to be attending that meeting. Is that fair to say?
That's fair.
Were you instructed by Captain Chistini that you and all officers needed to come to those meetings with the state attorney's office?
Yes, we were. I spoke to him specifically, and he advised that I attend.
Those pretrial meetings to prepare, those are things that officers with your agency do in most trial cases. Is that right?
Yes, typically.
You stated that you got an email from Katie Heck assigning you to a CIS tour. Is that right?
That's correct.
Does Katie Heck report to Tom Lewis?
Yes, she would have.
Does she work a chamber police event night like this with Tom Lewis?
I think she's typically there. As far, who attends and who doesn't attend, this specific one, I was asked to be there, so I was there.
What if she's not there? Is she in charge then?
I would be speculating. I can't say.
If she's not at the event that night, Could she possibly be in charge of checking Lee Cole's gun?
Sustained.
Is Katie Heck running the chamber police night by herself that night?
No, no.
The Simunitions Glock that you helped Captain Woodard load for the citizen in this case, was that for a right-handed shooter or a left-handed shooter?
The Glock itself,
Yes, sir.
I would say it's ambidextrous.
Do you remember giving a statement to an investigator with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement that would have been Special Agent Michael Ortiz on August 10th of 2016?
Yes.
Calling council's attention to page 9, lines 6 through 8.
And I see that, if I'd asked the council if you would start for the context of it, page 8, line 24.
Detective DeVolt, on that date, you were asked by Special Agent Ortiz, talking about the Simunitions block. And it was for a right-handed shooter, correct? And your answer was, that's correct.
I'd like to say that I was referring to the holster.
The holster was for a right-handed?
Yes,
Do you know whether Mary Knowlton was right-handed or left-handed?
I do not.
You've testified here that everyone is responsible for checking everyone in a scenario where firearms are going to be used. Is that right?
I don't know, I don't recall if I said that or not. I said that everybody signs a paper with safety protocol.
Have you said here that everybody's a safety officer?
I don't think those words came out of my mouth.
You didn't check Lee Cole's gun that night, right?
No, I did not.
And you saw him with that revolver in his waistband, and you testified on cross that that was dangerous or not recommended, I think were your words. Is that right?
For a weapon with live ammunition, that's correct.
And you didn't alert anybody at the Punta Gorda Police Department that night that this was happening. Lee Cole's got this gun in his waistband.
No, I did not, because it appeared to be the Simunitions gun that we typically use for Simunitions.
Is it a blue gun?
No, it was a chrome revolver.
And the blue gun that you loaded with Captain Woodard, that was a Simunitions gun.
That was a Simunitions gun, yes.
The revolver in Lee Cole's waistband was something different, right?
I don't know, I've never seen the gun. The gun that I thought it was a Simunitions revolver that we use in training.
You testified earlier that during in-service training, there's a designated person leading the training, is that right?
Typically, yes.
And when the officers go to the training, everybody knows that's the person in charge?
Yes,
That's the leader of the training, right?
sure.
This shoot, don't shoot scenario that is what this case is about, would you call that a training?
I would call it a demonstration.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Briefly.
I've never done a depo with you or taken a statement from you or even met you before today, have I?
No.
Okay. So did I understand you right that, my understanding, and tell me if this is correct, my understanding was a pre-trial meeting is a voluntary meeting to go talk to anybody that's going to do a case with a testimony, kind of go over things, make sure everybody's got everything understood right, correct?
Correct.
And normally those things are voluntary, and even when you're meeting with the state or even meeting with the fact, right?
Yes.
Okay, so do I understand it right then, by his questionings, that the acting chief, Simunition, who was a witness in this case, did he order you to go talk to the state, and you expressed that you did not want to go?
He advised me that I should attend, yes.
And Okay, so when I asked you for, was it voluntary, was it you went because you wanted to go, or did you go because you thought you were ordered to go?
I was under the impression that I was ordered to go. I initially approached Captain Cischini because I did not want to attend the pretrial. And he advised that I should go and be professional and be honest, which I always would.
Were you aware at the time that he told you to do that, he was listed as a witness in this case?
I did not.
Did he advise you to be a witness in the case?
I don't think he did.
Were you aware that he had met with the state attorney in the same capacity?
Actually, my pretrial was coming up the next day or two, following this conversation. I did not know until I completed my pretrial, and as I was leaving the room, he was standing outside.
The line that the prosecutor asked you about, I want to go back a few steps and ask you, if you recall, these were the questions and answers. The prosecutor asked you was the question, and it was for a right-handed shooter, correct? And that's correct. He read that to you, correct?
Yes.
I want to go back a little further. You remember being asked the following series of questions by Special Agent Michael Ortiz on August 10th, 2016 at 10:48 a.m. Okay, question, okay. And was the holster meant for the Simunition gun? Your answer. It is meant for a Glock, as a cutoff. Ortiz, okay. You, weapon. Ortiz, okay. You. And the Simunition's gun is a Glock, okay, from Ortiz. And he says, and it was for a right-handed shooter, correct? That's correct. That's what you thought was referencing when you started the question. Was the holster meant for a Simunition's gun, correct?
Yes.
And so holsters, when you said earlier, let me strike that. When you said earlier that weapons are ambidextrous, that's the word you used there?
Yes.
It means any hand can pick it up either way and fire it, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. There is not a left-handed gun or a right-handed gun.
For shooting purposes, no.
Okay. But there are holsters that are designed because of where it has to sit to pull that are left and right.
That's correct.
Okay. And your holster for you is which one?
That's a right-handed shooter.
And is that what you were referring to when you said it's a right-handed shooter, correct?
Yes.
Nothing.
You may step down. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been taking testimony for a little over an hour, so again, I think it's a good time to break, use the restroom, stretch your legs. We'll take about a 10-minute recess, and we'll bring you back out when we can. Court is in recess.
Leave your folders on your chairs, turn them upside down if you leave them open, so that nobody can see what's on them. All rise, court stands in recess.
Are they ready to proceed? All right.
Now we're ready. Come on now.
may be seated. Thank you for your patience, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just going to stop giving you a timeline on breaks and just say we're taking one. State, are you ready to proceed?
Yes, sir.
Call your next witness.
Jeffrey Woodard.
Stand here, face the clerk this morning.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony given in this class will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
Please make sure to speak into the microphone.
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you tell the members of the jury your name, please?
Jeffrey Woodard,
And can you spell your last name for us, please?
Woodard.
And Mr. Woodard, are you employed?
No, sir.
Okay, did you formerly work for the Punta Gorda Police Department?
Yes, sir, I did.
And when did you leave the Punta Gorda Police Department?
June 2nd.
Of this year?
Yes, sir.
How long did you work with Punta Gorda?
Approximately 14 and a half years.
When you started with Punta Gorda Police Department, what was your assignment initially?
Patrol officer.
Okay, when you left the Punta Gorda Police Department, what was your assignment when you resigned on June 2nd?
I was the operations captain.
And what does the operations captain do?
Basically oversees the everyday functions of the department, road patrol, criminal investigation section.
You oversee all of the sworn law enforcement officers?
For the most part, yes, sir.
Where do you sort of rank in the hierarchy?
There would be the chief and there's 2 captains.
So 2 or 3, something like that?
Yes, sir.
And did you supervise Officer Lee Cole?
Yes, sir, I did for approximately 6 weeks to 2 months, or a month, I'm sorry. Yeah, 2 months.
When did Tom Lewis become the chief of police with the Punta Gorda Police Department?
Acting or,
Let's say interim.
I'm going to say September of 2015.
And then when he was formally chief of police, do you remember when that was?
I believe it was March or April of 2016. And I could be off, I'm not,
That's okay.
okay.
Who was the chief of police before Tom Lewis?
Chief Albert Arnell.
Butch Arnold?
Yes, sir.
And what position did Tom Lewis have before he became chief?
He was the operations captain.
The position you held just before you resigned?
Yes, sir.
When Chief Arnold was captain, or excuse me, when he was chief of police, did he have sort of a philosophy or an idea to have the police department involved with the community?
Yes, sir.
And when Tom Lewis became the chief of police, did he kind of continue that philosophy?
Yes, sir.
When Tom Lewis became the chief, were you promoted to operations captain?
Yes, sir.
And were you previously in charge of training law enforcement officers?
Yes, sir.
Are you a certified firearms instructor?
No, sir, I am not.
Do you know what an armorer is?
Yes, sir.
And can you explain to the jury what that means?
It is, an armorer is somebody who can identify problems with weapons, or if they break down or anything like that, they're capable of either fixing it or sending them out to be fixed.
Are you an armorer yourself?
I am a AR-15 armorer, or was.
AR-15, we're talking about a long rifle?
Patrol rifle, yes, sir.
What about handguns?
No, sir.
Is Tom Lewis a firearms instructor?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to direct your attention to August 9th of last year. Do you remember that night?
Yes, sir, I do.
And were you present at the Punta Gorda Police Department for a chamber police night?
I was.
Did the Punta Gorda Police Department invite members of the Chamber of Commerce to the department that night?
Yes, sir.
Why did that happen?
It's part of a community outreach.
And what was the point know you say community outreach, but you're trying to teach people a little bit about what officers do every day,
Just to, yes, to show them the workings of their police department.
some of the risks that are associated with
Yes, sir.
police work. When the guests arrived at the police department, was there some sort of presentation by Tom Lewis?
Yes, sir, there was.
Can you tell us what he did?
I wasn't in there for the whole part. I kind of bounced in and out. But in the past, it goes over budgetary issues, what the police department offers, the type of specialty teams that we have, and what our philosophy is as far as the community.
And you said that you were in and out of that presentation?
Yes, sir.
When you were in there and you're watching the presentation happen, do you recall who was present in that training room?
As far as,
Officers.
no, sir, no idea.
What happened after the presentation?
Immediately after?
What happens after the presentation?
After I believe it's the agency tours of different components of the agency.
Okay. And do you remember what components of the agency are toured?
I believe it's the criminal investigation section, communications, records, and then hitting all the other spots like maybe roll call, possibly the armory. But I think that's it.
After the tour groups are done, seeing the different spots, do they go outside for what's known as static displays?
Yes, sir.
And what happens at those?
We would have specialty units, whatever specialty units were chosen for that, whether it be road patrol, marine, bike unit, and they would be stationed out there. And the participants would come out, and our officers would say, "This is what I do. This is the equipment that I carry," and answer any questions that they might have.
What was supposed to happen? What was the next portion of the event after the static displays?
It was a shoot, no shoot scenario based event.
And that would have been, I guess, the fourth part of the event?
Yes, sir.
And was there supposed to be two parts to that shoot, don't shoot scenario?
There's two different scenarios, yes, sir.
Can you tell us about the first of the two scenarios?
The first scenario involves a suspicious person call where the participant is advised you just got dispatched to a call regarding a suspicious person, somebody looking into a parked vehicle.
Basically, one of the guests is playing the officer, and
Yes, sir.
Officer Cole playing the bad guy.
Yes, sir.
What is Officer Cole supposed to do in that scenario?
He is the suspicious person, and he's to verbally engage the officer as far as, "What are you doing here? Leaving me alone? You're bugging me." Something like that, banter to that effect. If the officer or the officer/participant doesn't take control of the situation and allows him to walk around, he can walk around to the back or wherever he deems that he wants to be. And then if they continue not to take control of the situation, he would remove his blanks gun and fire 1-2 rounds.
And when you say blanks gun, we're talking about a real gun?
That night, my understanding was it's a blanks gun. Learning through this entire thing that it was an actual gun, but I did not know that night.
What is a blanks gun?
Right, you asking me now or are you asking me the night of?
What did you know that night?
That it was a gun that was incapable of firing anything but blanks, such as a starter's pistol.
What do you know now?
That it is a real .38 special.
Tell us about the second part of the section 4. That's the other scenario that's supposed to happen.
The other scenario is the participant/officer is dispatched to a physical altercation at a local restaurant or bar or something like that, and they are going in there much the same way to take control of the situation.
And Officer Chodakowski and Officer Cole are both playing, I guess, the bar fighters, for lack of a better phrase?
Yes, sir.
How were the members of the chamber selected to participate in these scenarios?
I believe there was, Chief Lewis put his card in either under the seat or in a booklet. I think it was in a booklet on a table, and there was only, I want to say 4 cards. 2 of them said taser, 2 of them said scenario or something along those lines. Whoever opened up their book and had that in their book were the participants that were chosen for that event.
Those were booklets placed in the training room at the
I believe they were placed at the tables, yes, sir.
Tom Lewis put those there?
I don't know that he put them there. I'm not sure who put them there, to be honest with you.
Would it refresh your recollection if you could look at a copy of the deposition transcript?
Yes, sir.
You may.
Mr. Woodard, if you could just take a look at the lines there that I've just kind of bracketed, if you could just look at those for a moment when you've had a chance to read it. Just look at that, please.
Just the ones that you have?
If you need to look at more, please feel free.
No? Okay. Okay.
Does that refresh your recollection?
It's still, I mean, he might have put as far as passing them out, I don't know if he physically passed them out, or his cards, that's how we do it. I mean, he very well could have passed them out, but usually it's a group, because there's 40 people, it's multiple people passing out those booklets.
Someone placed those business cards in the booklets?
Yes, sir.
I think it was Tom Lewis.
It very well could have been.
How many members of the chamber were used for these scenarios that you described?
That night, I think there was 4 that were chosen. I think there was 4 cards that were given out.
Between the gun scenario and the taser?
Yes, sir, I believe it's 2 and 2.
Who were the Punta Gorda Police Department officers and employees that were there that night participating?
That I recall,
Yes, sir.
the chief, me, Captain Gischini, Lieutenant Salzman, Detective DeVault, Officer Angelini, Officer Lee Cole, Officer Chodakowski, Officer Angelini. And I can't remember if there was anybody else there. There was other people. There was a duty squad that was there. And there was people around, so I'm not sure if I left anybody out.
Were there some officers there watching that weren't participating in anything?
I believe so.
Was Gloria Sapanic there?
Yes. Yes, she was.
What about Marine Officer John Kennedy?
I believe so, yes.
Katie Heck, was she there?
No, sir, she wasn't.
What time did the event start that night?
5:30?
Do you know what time it was supposed to end at?
I believe 7:30.
Before this event on August 9th, had PGPD done this shoot, don't shoot scenario in the past?
Yes, sir.
How many times?
Approximately 3 or 4.
And was this something that the agency brought in different groups to do?
Yes, sir.
And in those 3 to 4 times, and on August 9th, was it the same 2 scenarios every time?
Yes, sir.
Was there any written guidance or step-by-step manual for the shoot, don't shoot scenario?
No, sir.
Was there any sort of written script?
As far as how to conduct the scenarios?
Correct.
No, sir.
anything written down about people's roles and their duties during that scenario?
No, sir. Other than the itinerary that is made up.
May I approach the clerk, Your Honor?
You may.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Mr. Woodard, I'm approaching you with states, let me publish it here for you. States 114. I'm sorry. States 114, is that the itinerary that you just mentioned?
Yes, sir, appears to be.
Thank you. I'll put that down. Did you participate in the shoot, don't shoot scenario on August 9th?
Yes, sir.
And were you specifically assigned to in this itinerary?
No, sir.
What was your role in the shoot, don't shoot that night?
My role that night was, as the chief was finishing his presentation up front, I went in and my role was to keep everybody on time and task so we could do all the projects that we had without going over allotted time. As the chief was giving his presentation, I went in and I said, Chief, you have, 3, 4, 5 minutes left to keep on track. He acknowledged me, continued his presentation. After the presentation was over, I asked him, Chief, do you want me to prepare the Simunitions weapon for the scenarios? He said, yes, please, something along those lines. At that time, I went out and went into the Armory, selected a Simunitions weapon, cleared it, made sure that the magazine was clear. At that time, I brought in Detective Justin DeVault into the Armory with me. I pulled out the Simunitions ammunition. I had them in my hand. I inspected them. I gave them to Detective DeVault to inspect, and I asked him to hand them to me a couple at a time, just to verify that we were using Simunitions ammunition. He handed it to me a couple of times. I loaded the magazine. I had the slide locked back, secured the Armory door, went back in the training room, and I put the magazine and the Simunitions weapon underneath a podium type thing. The tours were still going on. As the tours were going on, and again checking the time, I went out into the side parking lot where the static display was set up, and I just told the guys there we're about 3 minutes from them coming out to go through the static display. So those officers started setting up their individual displays for the community to come to.
Can I stop you there?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
That's
Yep.
okay. You obviously had access to the Armory,
Yes, sir.
and that's where all the Simunitions, weapons, and ammo are kept?
Yes, sir.
Are there any live guns, live ammo kept there?
Yes, sir.
Other than you, do you know who had access to the Armory back at that time?
I believe it was Chief Lewis, me, Lieutenant Salzman, and possibly 2 or 3 other firearms instructors.
Okay. You told us that you got the Simunitions weapon for Mary Knowlton to use there, right?
Yes, sir.
Did you get a Simunitions weapon for Officer Cole to use?
No, sir.
Okay, why not?
My understanding was that he was using his blanks gun.
This was, did you know he was going to be using the weapon that he used for canine training?
That was my understanding, is that it was a K9 blanks gun. Yes, sir.
You were his supervisor at that time, right?
Yes, sir.
When you were in the Armory, you told us about the magazine and the gun, the Simunitions weapon. Did you also get a little badge or something for Mary Knowlton?
I did. Yes, sir, I did.
What is the point of that?
I'm sorry?
What is the purpose of that?
Just to make them feel more like a police officer.
They're sworn officers?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that Simunitions weapon that you got from Mrs. Knowlton, is that designed to look like the Glocks that officers carry?
It's painted a different color, if that's what you're asking.
It's a blue gun?
Yes, sir.
Otherwise, is it about the same size and look?
Yes, sir.
Why did you have Detective DeVault go through the Simunitions ammo with you?
As a safety check, just to ensure that we were using the proper Simunitions ammunition, or Simunitions. Yes, sir.
How many rounds did you load into that magazine?
13, 14, thereabouts.
Do you know how many rounds that magazine held?
It's more than a typical magazine. So I want to say maybe 16 is capacity in it. I'm not 100% certain.
And were you discussed the static displays being set up. Were you present when those were happening?
No, sir.
Did you ever walk through any of the static displays, the bike, the Marine unit, the patrol car, any of that?
On that night? No, I was, like I said, I was out there in the beginning telling everybody, get ready, get set up, they're coming out. I very well could have been out there for a couple, especially during the end when the rain was coming in. I'm not sure that I walked through any of the presentations, but I could have been present while they were going on. Yes, sir.
At some point you were outside, did you see the rain coming?
Yes, sir, I did.
Did you tell the chief the rain was coming?
Yes, sir, I did.
What did he say to you when you said that to him?
I think how I put it to him was, there's rain coming in. If we still want to do the scenario portion, do you want to move it along? I believe he said something along the lines of, yes, that sounds good. He asked for his 2 participants for the scenario. At that point, I asked him, would you like me to take them in and prepare them for the scenario? He said something along the lines of yes, and I took the 2 participants inside the training room.
Did you get them ready for the scenario?
Yes, sir.
And did you explain the Simunitions weapon to those 2 participants?
Yes, sir. I went over the nomenclature of the weapon itself, the fact that even though these are detergent rounds, they are live rounds, so there is danger associated with it. Always index your finger. Don't ever keep your finger on the trigger unless you intend to utilize the weapon. Don't turn it towards your classmates or anybody else. When we get down there, if the scenario's over, don't point or turn or anything like that. We'll come to you.
Can those Simunitions rounds seriously hurt somebody?
Yes, sir.
After you explained how the Simunitions weapon worked in the scenario, did you take Mary Knowlton outside of the parking lot?
Yes, sir. I took her outside the front door, the training door.
Did you have the Sims gun, the magazine, and the badge that you got from the Armory?
Yes, sir. I did.
Did you have them all separated, or was the magazine in the firearm?
No, sir. I had them separated.
Were you the person that loaded the magazine into the gun eventually?
I believe I was. Yes, sir.
Did you before you did that, did you take the gun and the magazine and give it to Tom Lewis?
I did. When I stepped out of the training room, Captain Gischini was located probably about 15 feet from me. As I came out of the training room, I asked Captain Gischini, are we ready to go? He turned and spoke to somebody. I don't know who. He said, no, hold on. And we staged up by the training room door for probably another couple minutes. And I went over some more training or safety instructions with her. Just reiterated pretty much what I told her inside. When Captain Gischini said that we were ready to proceed, I walked her down to where Chief Lewis was. I presented him with the Simunitions weapon, the magazine, and the badge.
Okay. And was he standing on the curb of that parking lot area?
I believe so.
And you had obviously checked the Sims ammo. Detective DeVault had double-checked it. Did Tom Lewis triple-check that ammo?
I remember him holding up the magazine and looking at the ammo. I don't remember exactly what he was saying to the crowd, but or the participants, but I remember him saying that it's a detergent round, and giving some other safety instructions, I believe, but I don't know word for word what was said.
May I approach the clerk, Your Honor?
You may.
Captain Woodard, excuse me, Mr. Woodard, I'm going to show you States Exhibit 20 first. You see that all right from there?
Yes, sir, I can.
Okay, what's happening in States 20?
It appears that Chief Lewis is handing Mrs. Knowlton something.
And I'm going to show you States 17. Looks like you and Tom Lewis together, right?
Yes, sir.
What is in your right hand here?
I can't tell if it's the badge or the magazine from where
Can I go to what you're trying to explain in the photo?
You may.
Okay, I'm going to show you 17. If you could let me know what is in your hand, and I also would like to know what's in Tom Lewis's hand.
it looks like I'm holding the badge and he is holding the magazine.
Thank you. From here, I'm going to show you States 16. What are you doing in that photo?
It looks like I'm going over safety instructions and showing Mrs. Knowlton indexing.
Do you know if this would have been before or after you handed the magazine to Tom Lewis?
This would have been after.
This is before she goes into the scenario?
Yes, sir.
Who's that officer to your left?
Lieutenant Chris Salzman.
And the woman to the right of Mary Knowlton, is that Katie Heck?
No, that is accreditation manager Gloria Sapanek.
Thank you. Did Tom Lewis put the magazine into that Sims weapon himself?
I don't believe he did.
Do you remember being asked that question, or being asked,
Vaguely. I'd have to look at my statement to...
if I could show you a copy of your...
Yes, sir.
statement? Okay. And I'm going to show you, this is a statement you gave to Special Agent Michael Ortiz from FBI
Okay.
on August 10th. I'm going to show you starts on page 24 at the bottom, that last paragraph, and then it goes on to the next page, 25. I'll give you a moment to look at that.
Okay, sir.
Did Tom Lewis, or excuse me, does that refresh your recollection?
Yes, sir.
And did Tom Lewis put the magazine into that Sims weapon?
Yes, sir.
He did.
As I remember it.
Was Mary Knowlton nervous before that scenario began?
Yes, sir, she was.
Before the shoot, don't shoot scenario began, was there any kind of briefing done with Officer Lee Cole?
Formalized briefing, not that I had with him.
Did you speak with him in the parking lot before the event began?
I did, yes, sir.
Okay, face to face?
Yes, sir.
And after you spoke with Officer Cole, did you go to get sort of protective gear for him?
I did when I was, much like the static display. And I'm not sure when I spoke to you. It might have been while the static display was going on, just saying that they're at the static display. There's rain moving in. He said, I don't have a safety mask or gear. And I said, okay, well, let me go in and look for it. I went into the department, I looked in the storage room, I looked in Lieutenant Salzman's office, I didn't find it. So at that time, I got in my patrol car, I went to our storage unit that is off-site and picked up a mask and I believe maybe a vest for him. It was in the same bag, and came back and gave him and Officer Chodakowski the masks.
They each had a mask?
Yes, sir.
And those were kept at an off-site storage?
Yes, sir, they are.
They're not in the armory with the Sims weapons?
No, sir. They weren't that night.
Sure. Do you know if Officer Cole had a handler for this scenario?
No, sir.
And I guess what I mean by handler, is there someone that's assigned to him, I guess in case he goes crazy and starts firing off a ton of rounds, is there anyone there to stop him in case that happens?
A specific person dedicated to him?
Yes.
No, sir.
Certainly wasn't you.
No, sir.
Did you do any type of safety check with Officer Cole?
With Officer Cole, no, sir.
Did you see Officer Cole with his gun in his waistband?
Yes, sir, I did.
Is it a violation of PGPD's rules and policies and procedures for an officer to hold a gun in his waistband without a holster?
I believe it is, yes, sir.
And you saw him doing that?
I did. I didn't see how it was secured, but I saw it in his waistband.
Did you ever check that gun in his waistband?
I did not, sir.
Did you ever ask him whether he had any other weapons on him?
I did not, sir.
Did you ever pat him down for ammo or weapons, knives, anything like that?
No, sir, I did not.
And did you know that he would be in a shoot-don't-shoot scenario with a weapon that night?
Yes, sir, I did.
The itinerary that I showed you on Safety 114, is your name anywhere on there?
I'm so, what is,
Can I show it to you?
yes, sir.
Can I approach your arm?
You may.
No, sir, I do not see it.
You weren't even supposed to be there that night, is that right?
That is correct.
Were you in control of that shoot-don't-shoot scenario?
No, sir.
Was it ever discussed who was actually running that scenario?
It may have been. I wasn't part of any discussions or the coordination of the event itself.
You don't know if it was ever discussed?
I don't know that.
In prior chamber police nights or citizens academies where the shoot-don't-shoot scenario was used, did you ever check the role players' guns?
The role player gun, no. I have secured the Simunitions weapon like I did that night. I had done that, but I had never performed safety checks or checked that of the role players.
Okay, so yes for the civilians with the Simunitions gun, but not the officer.
Yes, if I think I have prepared the Simunitions weapon much like I did that night in the past.
In past shoot-don't-shoot scenarios when it was performed, was there ever a time where safety officers were used?
Assigned safety officers, the way we do those scenarios is everybody present is a safety officer. As far as a designated safety officer, I can't remember a conversation where anybody ever said, you are the designated safety officer for the event.
Before this took place on August 9th, did anyone at PGPD ever talk about a safety officer?
No, sir, I don't believe there were any discussions about a designated safety officer.
When you worked at the Punta Gorda Police Department, and certainly before August 9th, did you ever participate in any discussion with Tom Lewis about assignment of safety officers or checks in these shoot-don't-shoot scenarios?
For the community demonstrations? No, sir.
Officer Cole, was he the only K-9 officer in the K-9 unit at that time?
Yes, sir, he was.
Was he allowed to keep his own ammo for K-9 training?
Yes, sir.
Were you aware that he maintained his own ammo for K-9 training?
Blanks? Yes, sir.
Was he allowed to keep the gun that he used in his personal possession?
Yes, sir.
Certainly wasn't kept at DGPD,
No, sir.
not in the Armory.
No, sir.
Before the Chamber Police Night event began that night, was there any meeting or briefing about safety procedures or anything?
I'm not aware of that.
You told us before that you weren't even supposed to be there that night. How did you get assigned to your role that night?
That morning I came in and I was wearing a Class A uniform. Class A uniform is long sleeve. It's a dressier uniform that you don't normally wear unless you're doing something out of the ordinary. Somebody in the morning staff meeting said, why are you dressed up? And I said, I saw that there was a community demonstration tonight and I was going to help out. I was told that everything was taken care of. And I said, well, I'm taking my daughter to an open house at local school. I was going to come back over. And that's when I was told, well, if you want to help keep everybody on time and task, that would be great. And I agreed to do so.
That was a staff meeting?
That was a morning staff meeting, yes, sir.
August 9th, 2016?
Yes, sir.
Where did that take place?
In the administrative conference room at the police department.
Is that the same room that the chief's welcome took place in?
No, sir.
Okay. Who was at that staff meeting?
Me, Chief Lewis, Gloria Sapanic, maybe Chris Salzman, Jim Nichols, Captain Jim Nichols, and maybe Detective DeVault. I'm not certain.
And did Tom Lewis hold staff meetings like this every day?
Yes, sir.
What was the point of this?
Just to touch bases on anything that's going on that day or that happened over the night.
What happened in the night shift before the morning meeting?
Yes, sir.
And you were assigned a task for that night's event at that meeting?
Yes, sir.
Did the chief assign you to work Chamber Police Night?
I'm not sure what you're asking me.
Was it the chief that assigned you to work
To-
the event that night?
To be to do my role. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
That
Yep.
was the chief that did that?
Yes, sir.
Would you describe the Punta Gorda Police Department as a large law enforcement agency or a smaller one?
Smaller one.
All of the officers and the employees that work there, are they pretty close?
Absolutely.
And are you personally friends with pretty much everybody there,
Yes, sir.
including Tom Lewis?
Absolutely.
How long have you been friends with Tom Lewis?
Probably 15 years.
He obviously is the chief, right?
Yes, sir.
You were captain of operations, one of two captains, basically two or three in the agency.
2. Yes, sir.
So obviously, Tom Lewis is your supervisor or boss of some sort, right?
Yes, sir.
Have you spoken to Tom Lewis about the events of August 9th since it happened?
Yes, sir.
How many times?
I can't tell you how many times. The days, the weeks, the months after this, when we were doing policy review and
You may?